She had 10 days to save her family or watch them fall. Lydia Hawthorne stood outside the Duke of Blackwell's estate at midnight, her hands shaking as she clutched a forged letter of introduction. Inside, the most dangerous man in London waited, a man who destroyed rivals without hesitation, who never smiled, who trusted no one. She was about to ask him to marry her, not for love, for survival. Because the creditors were coming, the scandal was spreading, and she had one chance left to stop it all from crumbling. Stay with me until the end. Like and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight. Lydia stood in the narrow hallway of her family's townhouse and listened to the sound of water drumming against the windows. It should have been soothing. Instead, it felt like a countdown, each drop marking another second she didn't have. Miss Hawthorne, she turned. Mr. Pembroke, their solicitor, stood in the doorway to her father's study. His expression was carefully blank, which was never a good sign. "How bad is it?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked past her into the parlor, where her younger sister Eleanor sat by the fire, pretending to read. Their mother had taken to her bed 2 days ago and hadn't come down since. Pembroke set his leather case on the table and pulled out a stack of papers. "Your stepfather's debts are extensive." "I know that already," Lydia said. "Tell me something I don't know." "The primary creditor is Harold Voss." Eleanor's book slipped from her hands. Lydia's stomach dropped. "Voss? The moneylender?" "Among other things." Pembroke's voice was tight. "He's calling in the debt. All of it. And he's not interested in installments." "How much time do we have?" 10 days. Eleanor made a small, broken sound. Lydia crossed the room and gripped the back of a chair. "And if we can't pay?" Pembroke looked at her for a long moment. "He'll take the house, your mother's jewelry, everything that isn't entailed. And then," he hesitated, "there are rumors that Voss has been buying up debts across the city, not to collect them, but to control the families attached to them. He's building leverage." "Leverage for what?" "No one knows. But the families who've fallen under his influence, they don't speak about it, and they don't get out." The room went silent except for the rain. Lydia's mind was racing. 10 days, no money, no options. Her stepfather, may he rot wherever he'd run off to, had gambled and borrowed and lied his way into a pit so deep she couldn't see the bottom. And now it was her problem, her family's ruin. "There has to be something," she said quietly. Pembroke shook his head. "I've explored every avenue. Unless you can produce £20,000 in the next 10 days, or unless someone with significant influence intervenes on your behalf, then we find someone with influence." Eleanor looked up, her face pale. "Lydia, who would—" "I don't know yet." Lydia straightened. "But I'll figure it out." Pembroke gave her a look that was equal parts pity and doubt. "Miss Hawthorne, the kind of person with that much power doesn't help people like us, not without a price." "Then I'll pay it." "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes," Lydia said, her voice steady now. "I do, yeah." She spent the next 2 days asking questions. Not openly, that would have been suicide. But London society ran on gossip, and if you knew where to listen, you could learn almost anything. She started with the modiste who made her mother's dresses, then the housekeeper who'd worked for 3 different noble families, then a clerk at her stepfather's former club who owed her a favor from years ago. Piece by piece, she built a picture. Harold Voss wasn't just a moneylender. He was a spider at the center of a web that stretched across half of London's elite. Gambling debts, forged documents, blackmail. He collected leverage the way other men collected art. And once he had you, he didn't let go. But there was one name that kept coming up in the whispers. One man Voss had tried to corner and failed. Rowan Blackwell, the Duke of Ashford. Lydia had heard of him, of course. Everyone had. He was one of the most powerful men in England, wealthy, titled, and ruthlessly competent. He'd inherited the dukedom at 19 after his father's sudden death, and within 5 years he doubled the estate's value and destroyed 2 rival families who'd tried to challenge his claim. He was also, by all accounts, completely untouchable. "He doesn't socialize," the modiste had said, her needle flashing through silk. "Doesn't attend balls, doesn't keep mistresses, doesn't gamble. Just works, Manages his holdings, sits in parliament, crushes anyone who gets in his way. Why? Lydia had asked. The modiste shrugged. Some say he's heartless, others say he's just smart. Either way, no one gets close to him. Has anyone tried? Of course. Half the mamas in London have thrown their daughters at him. He ignores them all. Lydia had leaned forward. What about Voss? The modiste's hands had stilled. There was a rumor last year Voss tried to buy up some of the Duke's smaller properties, thought he could force a sale. The Duke didn't just refuse, he bought out 3 of Voss's biggest clients and left him scrambling to cover his losses. So they're enemies. I wouldn't say that. More like, the Duke doesn't acknowledge him, and that's worse. Lydia had filed that information away. Now, standing outside the Duke of Ashford's London residence at midnight, she wondered if she'd lost her mind. The house was enormous, 4 stories of pale stone and black iron, with windows that glowed faintly in the darkness. No parties, no music, just the cold, imposing silence of a fortress. She'd tried the proper channels first, sent a letter requesting an audience. It had been returned unopened. So here she was, uninvited, desperate. She knocked. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door swung open and a butler appeared, tall, gray-haired, with the kind of face that gave away nothing. "Miss," he said, his tone polite but final, "the Duke does not receive callers at this hour." "I'm aware." Lydia pulled the forged letter of introduction from her coat. "But I think he'll want to hear what I have to say." The butler didn't even glance at the letter. "I'm afraid that's not possible." "Tell him it's about Harold Voss." The butler's expression flickered. Just for a second, but it was enough. "Wait here," he said. The door closed. Lydia stood in the rain and counted her heartbeats. 50, 100, 200. Then the door opened again. "This way, Chaz." The inside of the house was as cold as the outside. Not literally, the fires were lit, the lamps glowing, but there was something sterile about it. No clutter, no personal touches, just expensive furniture arranged with geometric precision. The butler led her through a series of hallways and up a staircase, their footsteps echoing on marble floors. Finally, he stopped in front of a set of double doors. "The Duke will see you now." He opened the doors and stepped aside. Lydia walked in. The study was large and dimly lit, dominated by a massive desk near the far window. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes that looked like they'd actually been read. A fire burned low in the grate. And behind the desk, silhouetted against the rain-streaked window, sat the Duke of Ashford. He didn't stand when she entered, didn't speak, just watched her with the kind of stillness that made her skin prickle. Lydia forced herself to meet his gaze. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 30, with sharp features and dark hair that was slightly too long. His eyes were pale, almost colorless in the dim light. He wore no jacket, just a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and there was an ink stain on one hand. He looked like a man who didn't sleep much. "You have 2 minutes," he said. His voice was low, clipped, without inflection. "Speak." Lydia's rehearsed speech evaporated. She'd planned this, gone over it a dozen times. But standing here, in front of him, she realized how insane it all sounded. "My name is Lydia Hawthorne," she said. "My family is in debt to Harold Voss. He's calling it in, and we can't pay. In 10 days, he'll take everything we have." The Duke said nothing. "I know you have no reason to care about that," Lydia continued. "But I also know Voss is a problem for you. He's been trying to buy influence across London, and sooner or later, that influence is going to be used against you." "Is that a threat?" "No. It's a fact." The Duke leaned back in his chair. "And what exactly do you think I should do about it?" Lydia took a breath. "Marry me." Silence. Then, to her surprise, the Duke laughed. It was a short, humorless sound. "You're serious?" "Yes? You broke into my house at midnight to propose marriage." "I didn't break in. Your butler let me in." "Because you lied to him." "I told him it was about Voss." "That wasn't a lie." The Duke stood. He was tall, taller than she'd expected, and when he moved around the desk, Lydia had to fight the urge to step back. He stopped a few feet away and studied her like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "Why would I marry you?" he asked. "Because you need a wife." His expression didn't change. I don't. Yes, you do. You're 30 years old, you have no heir, and your political enemies are starting to whisper that you're unstable. A wife would silence them. And you think you're qualified? I'm the daughter of a baronet. My family has a title, even if we don't have money. I know how to navigate society. I can play the role. And I won't ask you for anything you're not willing to give. Except £20,000. To pay off Voss, yes. But in return, you get a respectable marriage, political stability, and the satisfaction of watching Voss lose. The Duke tilted his head slightly. You've thought this through. I had to. He walked past her to the fireplace and stood there staring into the flames. Lydia waited. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Finally, he spoke. If I agreed to this, and I'm not saying I will, what would you expect from the arrangement? Nothing, Lydia said. It would be a business transaction. You get a wife for appearances, I get my family's debts cleared. No emotions, no expectations, no future beyond that. And how long would this transaction last? As long as you need it to. He turned to look at her. You're asking me to tie myself to a stranger for the foreseeable future based on a 2-minute conversation. Yes, that's insane. I know. The Duke was silent for a long moment. Then he crossed the room to his desk, picked up a piece of paper, and scrawled something on it. I'll have my solicitor draw up a contract, he said without looking at her. If you're serious, you'll sign it. If you're not, don't waste my time again. Lydia blinked. You're agreeing? I'm considering it. There's a difference. Why? He finally looked up, and for the first time she saw something flicker in his expression. Not warmth, nothing close to that, but something sharper. Calculation. Because you're right, he said. Voss is a problem, and I don't like problems. He held out the paper. Be here tomorrow at noon. Bring your solicitor if you have one. We'll negotiate terms. Lydia took the paper with shaking hands. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her at the door. Miss Hawthorne. She looked back. If you're lying to me about any of this, I will ruin you. Not just you, your family, everyone you care about. Do you understand? Lydia met his gaze and didn't flinch. Yes. Good. She left. The negotiations took 3 days. Lydia's solicitor, Mr. Pembroke, who looked like he might faint the entire time, sat across from the Duke's team of lawyers and tried to keep up. The contract was brutal in its precision. Every clause, every contingency, every possible outcome mapped out in cold legal language. The Duke would pay off her family's debts in full. In return, Lydia would marry him within the week and remain his wife for a minimum of 2 years. During that time, she would live in his household, attend social functions as required, and maintain the appearance of a legitimate marriage. No infidelity, no scandal, no public disagreements. If she broke the terms, the debts would revert to her family. If he broke them, she would receive a settlement of £10,000 and her freedom. It was, Pembroke said quietly, the most one-sided contract he'd ever seen. He's protecting himself, Lydia said. He's trapping you. It's the same thing. On the 3rd day, the Duke himself appeared in the negotiation room. He dismissed the lawyers with a wave of his hand and sat down across from Lydia. You have questions, he said. It wasn't a question. 1, Lydia said. Why are you really doing this? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled a folder from his coat and slid it across the table. Lydia opened it. Inside were documents, letters, ledgers, contracts, all bearing Harold Voss's name, and woven through them like a thread of poison were connections to a dozen powerful families. Blackmail, coercion, control. Voss isn't just a moneylender, the Duke said. He's building a network. In 6 months, maybe a year, he'll have enough leverage to move against me directly. I'd rather cut him off now. And I'm the knife. You're the distraction. When I pay off your family's debt publicly, it sends a message. Voss loses a prize and everyone watching sees that I'm not afraid of him. Lydia closed the folder. And the marriage? Like you said, I need a wife. This kills 2 birds. How romantic. The corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. Romance isn't part of the contract, he said. I noticed. He stood. Sign it or don't, but decide today. Lydia looked down at the contract, 50 pages of her life, reduced to terms and conditions. She picked up the pen. Where do I sign? The wedding was small, not by choice, by design. The Duke didn't want a spectacle, and Lydia didn't have the energy to pretend otherwise. So they were married in a private ceremony at his estate, with only a handful of witnesses, Pembroke, the Duke's steward, and Eleanor, who cried through the entire thing. Lydia wore a dress her mother had worn 30 years ago. The Duke wore black. The officiant asked if they took each other as husband and wife. They both said yes. No one cheered. Afterward, there was a brief meal in the dining room, silent, awkward, punctuated only by the sound of silverware on china. Eleanor kept glancing between Lydia and the Duke like she was waiting for one of them to crack. Neither did. When it was over, the Duke stood. I have work to finish. Mrs. Garrick will show you to your rooms. Lydia blinked. My rooms? You'll have your own suite. We're not sharing. I didn't think we were. Good. He left without another word. Eleanor stared at the empty doorway. Lydia, what have you done? Lydia didn't answer. She wasn't sure she knew. Isam, her rooms were beautiful. That was the first thing she noticed. A sitting room with tall windows overlooking the gardens, a bedroom with a 4-poster bed and silk curtains, a dressing room larger than her entire childhood bedroom. It was perfect, and it felt like a prison. Mrs. Garrick, the housekeeper, was a brisk woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She showed Lydia around with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 100 times. The Duke takes breakfast at 7, she said. He doesn't expect you to join him, but you're welcome to if you like. Dinner is at 8. Again, optional. He spends most of his time in his study or at Parliament. Does he ever not work? Lydia asked. Mrs. Garrick gave her a look. Not in the 5 years I've been here. That's not healthy. That's not my business, or yours. Lydia bit back a retort. Of course. Mrs. Garrick softened slightly. You'll find your footing, Your Grace. It just takes time. Your Grace. Lydia tested the words. They felt wrong in her mouth. You'll get used to it, Mrs. Garrick said. Everyone does. But as the door closed behind her, leaving Lydia alone in the too large, too quiet suite, she wasn't so sure. The first week passed in a blur. Lydia barely saw the Duke. He left early, returned late, and communicated mostly through notes left on the breakfast table. Attending a session at Parliament, meeting with the steward, visiting the country estate. He moved through the house like a ghost, present but untouchable. She tried to settle in, explored the library, walked the gardens, wrote letters to Eleanor and her mother, but the house felt hollow, and every room she entered seemed to echo with her own uncertainty. On the 8th day, Mrs. Garrick knocked on her door. His Grace requests your presence at dinner tonight. Lydia looked up from her book. He does? Yes. 8 o'clock? The formal dining room. Why? Mrs. Garrick's expression was unreadable. He didn't say. Lydia arrived at the dining room 5 minutes early, her stomach knotted with nerves. The Duke was already there, standing by the window with a glass of wine. He turned when she entered, and for a moment they just looked at each other. You came, he said. You asked. I wasn't sure you would. Why wouldn't I? He didn't answer. Instead, he gestured to the table. Sit. She did. The first course arrived, soup, delicate and perfectly seasoned, and they ate in silence. Lydia kept glancing at him, trying to figure out what this was about. Some test? A formality? Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore. Why am I here? She asked. The Duke set down his spoon. Because we're married, and people are starting to notice that we never appear together. So this is for appearances. Everything is for appearances. Right. Lydia took a sip of wine. How efficient. You sound disappointed. I'm not. I agreed to this. But you didn't expect it to feel like this. She looked at him sharply. Like what? Empty. The word hung in the air between them. Lydia set down her glass. You're the one who made it this way. I know. Then why are you complaining? I'm not complaining. I'm observing. Well, observe quietly. To her surprise, he smiled. It was small, barely there, but real. "You're angry," he said. "I'm frustrated." "Why?" "Because I don't know what you want from me." The Duke leaned back in his chair. "I want you to play the role we agreed on. Be my wife in public. That's all. And in private?" "In private, we don't have to pretend." "So what are we then?" He considered the question. "Strangers with a contract." Lydia laughed, though there was no humor in it. "How comforting." The second course arrived. They ate. But this time the silence felt different, less hostile, more curious. "Can I ask you something?" Lydia said eventually. "You just did." "Can I ask you another something?" The Duke's mouth twitched. "Go ahead." "Why do you hate Voss so much?" His expression shuddered. "I don't hate him." "You're lying." "I don't lie." "Everyone lies." He set down his fork and looked at her directly. "Voss tried to blackmail me 2 years ago. He thought he had leverage, a forged document linking me to a financial scandal. It was crude, easy to disprove, but it would have caused trouble." "What did you do?" "I destroyed him, quietly, thoroughly. And he's been trying to rebuild ever since." "And you don't want him to succeed?" "No." Lydia studied him. "You're not afraid of him?" "No." "Then what are you afraid of?" The Duke's gaze darkened. "Who says I'm afraid of anything?" "Everyone's afraid of something." He didn't answer. Instead, he stood and walked to the sideboard, pouring himself another glass of wine. Lydia waited. Finally, he spoke. "Losing control?" "Of what?" "Everything." The honesty in his voice startled her. He turned back to face her. "I built this. All of it. The estate, the reputation, the power. And I did it alone, because trusting people means giving them the ability to take it away. So yes, I'm afraid, but only of that." Lydia didn't know what to say. The Duke returned to the table but didn't sit. "You should know something." "What?" "This arrangement we have, it works because we both know what it is. But if you start expecting more, it'll fall apart. And I won't be the one who suffers." "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning." Lydia stood. "Then let me give you one. I'm not some fragile girl who needs protecting or managing. I came to you with a deal, and I'll hold up my end, but don't mistake my cooperation for weakness." They stared at each other. Then the Duke nodded slowly. "Fair enough." "Good." She turned to leave. "Lydia." She stopped. "Thank you for coming tonight." She looked back, surprised, but he'd already turned away. The dinner became a routine. Every night at 8, they met in the formal dining room. At first, the conversations were stiff, transactional, discussions of upcoming social events, schedules, logistics. But gradually, almost against their will, the topics began to shift. He asked about her childhood. She asked about his work. She told him about Eleanor's love of painting. He told her about the year he'd spent rebuilding the estate's finances after his father's death. They disagreed about books, about politics, about whether the cook's roast was overcooked. It wasn't. And somewhere in the middle of those dinners, Lydia realized she was starting to look forward to them. Not because of the food, not because of the role, because of him. It was a dangerous realization. Boom. 3 weeks into the marriage, they attended their first public event together, a ball hosted by the Marchioness of Salisbury. Lydia wore emerald silk. The Duke wore black, as always. They arrived late, as was fashionable, and the entire ballroom seemed to pause when they entered. "They're staring," Lydia murmured. "Let them," the Duke said. His hand rested lightly on the small of her back, a gesture that looked possessive but felt oddly protective. They made their rounds, introduced themselves, smiled at the right people. Lydia played her part flawlessly, charming, poised, just the right amount of deferential. But she could feel the weight of the scrutiny, the whispers, the speculation. "She's younger than I expected. Do you think it's a love match?" "Don't be absurd. He doesn't do love." Lydia kept her expression neutral. The Duke leaned down, his breath warm against her ear. "You're doing well." "I'm pretending." "So am I." She glanced up at him, and for a moment their eyes met. Then someone called his name, and the moment broke. Halfway through the evening, Harold Voss appeared. Lydia saw him first. a tall, thin man with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He moved through the crowd with the ease of someone who knew exactly how dangerous he was, and he was heading straight for them. "Your Grace," Voss said, bowing slightly. "What a pleasure." The Duke's expression didn't change. Voss. "And this must be the new Duchess." Voss turned to Lydia, his gaze sharp. "Congratulations on your marriage, my lady. Quite the stroke of fortune." Lydia smiled sweetly. "Thank you. I must admit I was surprised when I heard the news. The Duke is notoriously selective." "I'm very lucky," Lydia said. "Indeed." Voss's smile widened. "Though I confess I was disappointed to lose the opportunity to assist your family personally." The Duke's hand tightened on Lydia's waist. "Her family is no longer your concern." "Of course not. You've seen to that." There was a beat of silence. Then Voss chuckled. "Well, I won't keep you. Enjoy the evening." He walked away. Lydia exhaled slowly. "Are you all right?" the Duke asked quietly. "Yes." "You're shaking." "I'm fine." He pulled her closer, and for a moment she let herself lean into him. "He can't touch you now," the Duke said. "I know." But as she watched Voss disappear into the crowd, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not even close. The carriage ride home was silent. Lydia sat across from the Duke, watching the lights of London slip past the window. Her hands were still trembling, though she'd folded them in her lap to hide it. "You handled that well," the Duke said finally. She didn't look at him. "I smiled and lied, just like you told me to. That's all anyone does at these things." "Is it?" She turned to face him. "Because Voss wasn't lying. He was threatening us. He was testing us. Same thing." The Duke was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Voss thrives on fear. The moment you show it, he wins. You didn't show it. That matters." "I was terrified." "I know, but he didn't see it." Lydia looked at him, really looked at him. In the dim light of the carriage, his face was half in shadow, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands were clenched. "You were scared too," she said quietly. He didn't deny it. "Yes." "Of what?" "That he'd say something that would make you regret this." The admission caught her off guard. She'd expected deflection, maybe anger, not honesty. "I don't regret it," she said. "You will, eventually." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." He sat back. "Everyone does." The carriage stopped in front of the estate. The Duke stepped out first and offered his hand. Lydia took it, and for a moment they stood there in the cold night air, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow's going to be worse." "Why?" "Because word travels fast. By noon, half of London will know we attended together, and the other half will be trying to figure out what it means." He released her hand and walked inside. Lydia followed, her mind racing. She'd known this wouldn't be easy, but standing there in the ballroom, feeling the weight of all those eyes, the sharp edge of Voss's smile, it had been real in a way the contract never was. This wasn't just a transaction anymore. It was a war, and she was in the middle of it. Timnet. The next morning, Lydia woke to find a stack of invitations on her breakfast tray. 12 of them, all delivered overnight. She flipped through them. A garden party at Lady Harrington's estate, a musicale hosted by the Dowager Countess of Kent, a charity auction, a dinner, a ball. Every single one addressed to the Duke and Duchess of Ashford. Mrs. Garrick appeared in the doorway. "His Grace thought you should see those." "He's already gone, I assume. Left at dawn. But he said to tell you that you're not obligated to attend any of them." Lydia set down the invitations. "What would happen if I did?" "You'd cement your position, show society that you're not just a convenient arrangement." "And if I don't?" "They'll assume you are." Lydia sighed. "So I don't really have a choice." Mrs. Garrick's expression softened. "You always have a choice, Your Grace. It's just a question of what you're willing to risk." She chose the garden party. It was the least formal of the options, which meant fewer people watching her every move. Or so she hoped. Eleanor came with her, partly for support, partly because Lydia needed someone to talk to who wasn't a servant or a stranger. "You look beautiful," Eleanor said as they stepped out of the carriage. Lydia glanced down at her pale blue dress. "I look like I'm trying too hard." "You look like a duchess." "That's worse." Eleanor laughed, but it was nervous. "Are you sure about this?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." The garden was already full of people when they arrived. Ladies in pastel gowns, gentlemen in dark coats, servants weaving through the crowd with trays of champagne. It should have been charming. Instead, it felt like walking into a lion's den. The moment Lydia stepped onto the lawn, the conversation around her faltered. Not stopped, just shifted. Quieter, more watchful. Eleanor gripped her arm. "They're staring. Let them." A woman approached, Lady Pemberton, one of the most notorious gossips in London. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Your Grace, what a delight to see you." Lydia returned the smile. "Lady Pemberton, thank you for the warm welcome. I must say we were all quite surprised by your marriage. The Duke is so private." "He is. And yet here you are, out in society, without him." There it was, the jab hidden in politeness. Lydia kept her voice light. "My husband has obligations in Parliament. I thought it would be rude to decline your invitation simply because he couldn't attend." Lady Pemberton's smile sharpened. "How independent of you." "I prefer thoughtful." "Of course." Lady Pemberton glanced at Eleanor. "And this is your sister, I presume?" "Yes. Eleanor Hawthorne." Eleanor curtsied, her face pale. Lady Pemberton studied her for a moment, then turned back to Lydia. "Well, I do hope you enjoy the party, though I must warn you, some of the other guests may not be as welcoming." "I'll manage." "I'm sure you will." She walked away. Eleanor exhaled. "I hate her." "Join the club." They moved through the party, making small talk with strangers who smiled too much and asked questions designed to trip her up. "Where did you meet the Duke? How long have you known each other? What are your plans for the future?" Lydia answered each one with the same careful vagueness she'd practiced in front of a mirror, but it was exhausting. By the time they found a quiet corner near the rose garden, she felt like she'd run a marathon. "I don't know how you're doing this," Eleanor said quietly. "I don't either." "Lydia, are you happy?" The question surprised her. "What?" "With him. With this life. Are you happy?" Lydia looked out at the party, the glittering dresses, the forced laughter, the careful performances everyone was giving. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I don't think happiness was part of the deal." Eleanor's face fell. "That's awful. It's practical. It's lonely." Lydia didn't have an answer for that. Before she could say anything else, a voice interrupted. "Duchess?" She turned. Harold Voss stood a few feet away, holding a glass of champagne. He looked relaxed, almost amused. Eleanor stiffened. Lydia forced a smile. "Mr. Voss, what a surprise." "Is it? I was invited after all." He stepped closer. "Though I must admit, I didn't expect to see you here. Alone." "I'm not alone. My sister is with me." "Of course. Forgive me." He glanced at Eleanor, then back at Lydia. "Still, it's unusual for a new bride to attend social functions without her husband. People might talk. People always talk." "True." Voss took a sip of champagne. "But some talk is more dangerous than others." Lydia's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "Is there something you want, Mr. Voss?" "Just to offer my congratulations. And a piece of advice." "I didn't ask for advice." "No, but you need it." He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. "Your husband thinks he's untouchable, that his title and his money can protect him from anything. But everyone has weaknesses, Duchess. Even him." "Is that a threat?" "It's an observation." Eleanor grabbed Lydia's hand, squeezing hard. Lydia met Voss's gaze and didn't blink. "If you have something to say it." Voss smiled. "I already have." He walked away. Lydia's hands were shaking again. Eleanor looked at her, wide-eyed. "Lydia, what was that?" "Nothing. He's just trying to rattle me." "It's working." "I know." They left the party 10 minutes later. The Duke was waiting for her when she got home. He was in the library, standing by the window with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He didn't turn when she entered, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "You went to the party," he said. "Yes." "I thought I told you that you didn't have to." "You did." "I went anyway." He finally turned to look at her. "Why?" "Because hiding makes me look weak, and I'm not weak." Something flickered in his expression. "Did something happen?" Lydia hesitated. Then she told him about Voss. By the time she finished, the Duke's jaw was tight, and his knuckles were white around the glass. "He approached you directly?" "Yes." "And threatened you?" "He implied a threat." "There's a difference." "Not to me." The Duke set down his glass and crossed the room. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "What did you say to him?" he asked. "I told him to say what he meant." "And?" He walked away. The Duke exhaled slowly. "You shouldn't have engaged with him." "What was I supposed to do? Run?" "Yes." "I'm not a coward." "I didn't say you were. But Voss is dangerous, and you don't know what he's capable of." Lydia's temper flared. "Then tell me. Stop treating me like a piece on a chessboard and tell me what's actually going on." The Duke stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned away. "Voss isn't just a moneylender," he said quietly. "He's been building a network for years. Blackmail, extortion, forged documents. He uses whatever he can to control people. And once he has them, he doesn't let go." "I know that already." "You don't know all of it." The Duke picked up his glass again, his movement stiff. 2 years ago, he tried to blackmail me. The documents were fake, but they were good enough to cause problems. I destroyed them, exposed his contacts, and made sure he lost half his clients. And now he wants revenge. Yes, but it's more than that. He's not just coming after me. He's coming after everyone connected to me, my allies, my business partners, my... He stopped. "Your wife," Lydia finished. "Yes." The word hung in the air. Lydia sat down slowly. "So this isn't just about paying off my family's debts. You married me to draw him out." "No. I married you because it was mutually beneficial, but I won't pretend it doesn't complicate things." "Complicate things?" Lydia's voice rose. "You made me a target. You were already a target the moment you walked into my house. Because of you. Because of him." They glared at each other. Then Lydia laughed, a short, bitter sound. "This is insane." "I know. We barely know each other, and we're already in the middle of some kind of vendetta." "I know." "And you didn't think to warn me?" The Duke's expression softened slightly. "I thought I could handle it without involving you." "Well, you were wrong." "I know." Lydia stood. "So what do we do now?" "We stay ahead of him. We don't give him anything he can use. And we don't let him see that he's getting to us." "That's not a plan. That's a platitude." "It's all I have." Lydia walked to the door, then stopped. "One more thing." "What?" "Stop trying to protect me. I didn't come here to be sheltered. I came here to survive." The Duke looked at her for a long moment. "Fair enough." She left. The next week was a blur of social engagements. Lydia attended every event she was invited to, always with Eleanor or alone. The Duke joined her twice, once at a dinner party, once at a ball, but mostly he stayed in the background, watching. She could feel Voss circling. Not directly, he was too smart for that. But she saw him at the edges of rooms, heard his name in conversations, felt the weight of his attention even when he wasn't there. And slowly, she began to notice something else. People were watching her. Not just out of curiosity, but with something sharper, calculation, assessment. She was no longer just the Duke's convenient wife. She was a player. One evening, after a particularly grueling dinner at the Marquis of Wycliffe's estate, Lydia returned home to find a letter waiting for her. It was unsigned, but the handwriting was elegant. "You're doing well, but be careful. Not everyone wants you to succeed." Lydia stared at the letter for a long time. Then she burned it. 2 days later, the Duke asked her to accompany him to a meeting with his solicitors. "Why?" she asked. "Because it concerns you." They met in a private office near Westminster. 3 men were already there, lawyers, all of them stone-faced and efficient. The Duke gestured for Lydia to sit. "Tell her." One of the lawyers cleared his throat. Your Grace, we've been investigating Harold Voss's network, and we've uncovered something troubling. Lydia's stomach dropped. What? Your stepfather didn't just borrow money from Voss. He was involved in a scheme to forge documents linking several noble families to a smuggling operation. What? The documents were fake, but they were convincing. And your stepfather was the one creating them. Lydia felt the room tilt. That's not possible. I'm afraid it is. We have evidence, letters, ledgers, contracts. Your stepfather was working for Voss. The Duke's hand found hers under the table, gripping tight. Why are you telling me this? Lydia asked, her voice shaking. Because Voss has been using those documents to blackmail people. And one of those people is threatening to go public unless we silence you. Silence me? I didn't do anything. You're connected to the scheme through your stepfather, and that's enough. Lydia pulled her hand away from the Duke's. So what am I supposed to do? Disappear? No, the Duke said sharply. You're going to help us destroy him. How? He leaned forward. By giving us everything you know about your stepfather. Every letter, every meeting, every piece of information you can remember. We'll use it to trace Voss's network and dismantle it. Lydia stared at him. You want me to betray my own family? Your stepfather betrayed you first. He's still family. He's a criminal. The words hit like a slap. Lydia stood. I need to think. We don't have time. I said I need to think. She walked out. She didn't go back to the estate. Instead, she went to the one place she knew she'd be safe, Eleanor's small apartment in Bloomsbury. Eleanor opened the door in her nightgown, eyes wide. Lydia? What's wrong? Lydia pushed past her and sat down on the worn sofa. Everything. Eleanor closed the door and sat beside her. Tell me. So Lydia did. She told her about the meeting, the lawyers, the documents. She told her about Voss, about the Duke, about the trap that was closing in around her. When she finished, Eleanor was pale. What are you going to do? She asked. I don't know. You could walk away? I can't. The contract doesn't matter if you're in danger. Lydia looked at her sister. Yes, it does. Because if I break it, Voss wins. And everything we fought for, the house, Mother, you, it all falls apart. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. I don't want you to do this alone. I'm not alone. Yes, you are. The Duke doesn't care about you. He cares about winning. Lydia didn't answer, because she wasn't sure Eleanor was wrong. She stayed at Eleanor's apartment that night, curled up on the sofa with a blanket that smelled like lavender and old books. And for the first time since the wedding, she let herself cry. She returned to the estate the next morning. The Duke was waiting in the library. He looked like he hadn't slept. I'm sorry, he said before she could speak. Lydia stopped. What? I'm sorry. I pushed too hard. I should have given you time. She crossed the room slowly. Why are you apologizing? Because you were right. I've been treating you like a piece on a chessboard, and you're not. Then what am I? He looked at her, and for the first time she saw something raw in his expression. I don't know, but I'm starting to think you're the only person in this mess I can actually trust. The honesty in his voice undid something in her chest. I'll help you, she said quietly. I'll give you everything I know about my stepfather, but on one condition. What? You stop lying to me, about Voss, about the danger, about all of it. I need the truth. The Duke nodded. Deal. Good. Lydia sat down. Then let's get to work. They spent the next 3 days combing through every letter, every document, every scrap of information Lydia could remember. It was brutal. Every memory of her stepfather felt like a knife. His charm, his lies, the way he'd smiled while destroying them. But slowly, a picture emerged. Voss's network was larger than they'd thought. It stretched across London, into Parliament, into the aristocracy. And at the center of it all was a web of forged documents designed to control, manipulate, and destroy. He's been planning this for years, the Duke said, staring at the map they'd created. And my stepfather was his tool. Yes, Lydia's hands clenched. I want him to pay. The Duke looked at her. Who, Voss or your stepfather? Both. Something fierce flashed in his eyes. Then let's make sure they do. But that night, as Lydia lay in bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something, some piece of the puzzle that would change everything. And when the knock came at her door at 2 a.m, she knew she was right. She opened it to find the Duke standing there, his face grim. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Voss knows," he said. "He knows we're investigating him, and he's making his move." Lydia's blood went cold. "What kind of move?" The Duke handed her a letter. She read it once, then again. "You took something from me. Now I'll take something from you. Tick-tock, Duchess." Her hand started shaking. "He's coming for us," she whispered. "Yes," the Duke said, "and we have 72 hours to stop him." Lydia stared at the letter until the words blurred. "What does he want?" "Everything." The Duke's voice was flat, controlled. "Your silence. My reputation. Control. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." She looked up at him. He was still in his shirt sleeves, hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. There was something almost vulnerable about him standing there in her doorway at 2 a.m, holding a threat neither of them fully understood. "How did he even know?" she asked. "Someone talked. Or he has someone inside my household." The implication settled over her like ice water. "You think there's a spy?" "I think Voss doesn't make moves like this without information, and we've been careful, which means someone's been watching us." The Duke nodded. "I've already had my steward start investigating the staff, quietly. But that takes time we don't have." Lydia set the letter down on her nightstand and wrapped her arms around herself. She was only wearing a thin nightgown, and the room suddenly felt too cold. 72 hours. What happens then? He didn't say, but Voss doesn't bluff. So we have 3 days to figure out what he's planning and stop it. Yes, that's impossible. Probably. The Duke stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. "But we're going to try anyway." She should have told him to leave. It wasn't proper, him being in her bedroom like this. But propriety felt like a joke right now, a thin veneer over something much darker. "Where do we start?" she asked, "with the one person who might know what Voss is planning." "Who?" "Your stepfather." Lydia's stomach dropped. "He's gone. No one's seen him in months. That's what he wants people to think." The Duke pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "My investigators found him 3 days ago. He's been hiding in Dover using a false name." "You knew where he was and didn't tell me?" "I was waiting for the right time." "The right time?" Lydia's voice rose. "He's the reason we're in this mess, and you were just... what? Sitting on that information?" "I was protecting you." "I don't need protection. I need the truth." They stared at each other, the air between them crackling with tension. Finally, the Duke exhaled. "You're right. I should have told you. But we need him, Lydia. He's the only one who knows the full scope of what Voss is planning." "And you think he'll just tell us?" "No, but I think you might be able to convince him." The words hit her like a punch. "Me?" "You're his stepdaughter. He might still have some shred of—" "He has nothing," Lydia said sharply. "He destroyed my family, stole from us, and ran. He doesn't care about me." "Then use that. Use his guilt, his fear, whatever it takes. Because if we don't get answers in the next 3 days, Voss wins. And when he wins, we all lose." Lydia wanted to argue, wanted to tell him to find another way. But she could see the desperation in his eyes, carefully hidden, but there. And she knew he was right. "Fine," she said. "When do we leave?" "Now. We can be in Dover by dawn if we leave within the hour." "You're coming with me?" "Did you think I'd send you alone?" Something in his tone made her chest tighten. "I can handle this myself." "I know you can, but you don't have to." The sincerity in his voice undid her. She nodded. "Give me 10 minutes to dress." They rode through the night in near silence. The Duke had arranged for a fast carriage and 2 outriders, and they made good time despite the darkness. Lydia sat across from him, watching the countryside blur past the window. She changed into a plain traveling dress and cloak, nothing that would draw attention. The Duke wore dark clothes, his usual armor of black wool and sharp lines. He'd brought a pistol. She'd seen him tuck it into his coat pocket before they left, and the weight of it hung in the air between them like an unspoken threat. Tell me about him, the Duke said eventually. Lydia didn't pretend not to understand. My stepfather? Yes. She was quiet for a moment, gathering the memories she'd tried so hard to bury. His name is Marcus Webb. He married my mother when I was 15. He was charming, attentive, everything she needed after my father died. Or so we thought. When did you realize he wasn't? About a year in. Small things at first. Money going missing, debts he claimed were temporary. Then bigger things. He started gambling, staying out all night, coming home smelling like cheap perfume and cheaper wine. She paused. My mother pretended not to notice. Eleanor was too young to understand, so I just watched him destroy us piece by piece. And you didn't try to stop him? I was 16. What was I supposed to do? The Duke's jaw tightened. You could have, what? Gone to the authorities? Told society that my stepfather was a liar and a cheat? That would have ruined us just as thoroughly as his debts did. She met his eyes. I did what I could. I tried to talk to him, tried to make him see reason, but he didn't care. And eventually, I realized that nothing I did would ever be enough. That's why you came to me. Yes, because I was tired of being helpless. The Duke looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached across the carriage and took her hand. The gesture surprised her. He wasn't the type for casual touch, but she didn't pull away. You're not helpless, he said quietly. You never were. I felt like it. I know, but feeling something doesn't make it true. They sat like that for a while, hands clasped in the darkness, until the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon. They found Marcus Webb in a boarding house on the edge of Dover, 3 streets from the docks. The building was shabby, paint peeling from the shutters, roof sagging in the middle, the kind of place where people came to disappear. The Duke had sent one of the outriders ahead to confirm Webb's location, and when they arrived, the man was waiting outside. 3rd floor, the outrider said. Room at the end of the hall. He's alone. Good. The Duke turned to Lydia. Stay behind me. No.
Lydia says, I'm not hiding. He's my stepfather. I'll face him. The Duke looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. Fine. But if anything goes wrong, I know. You have a gun. I was going to say run, but yes, that too.
They climbed the narrow stairs, the wood creaking under their weight. The hallway smelled like damp and old cooking grease. Lydia could hear voices behind some of the doors, arguments, crying, the low murmur of lives lived in quiet desperation. The Duke knocked on the last door. Silence. He knocked again, harder this time. A voice came from inside, slurred and wary. Who is it? Lydia stepped forward before the Duke could answer. It's me. Open the door. A long pause. Then the sound of shuffling footsteps, a lock turning. The door opened. Marcus Webb looked like he'd aged 20 years in the 6 months since she'd last seen him. His face was gaunt, unshaven, eyes bloodshot and ringed with dark circles. He wore a stained shirt and trousers that hung loose on his frame. When he saw Lydia, something flickered in his expression. Shame, maybe, or fear. Lydia, he said hoarsely, what are you doing here? We need to talk. His gaze shifted to the Duke, and his face went pale. Who's this? My husband. Marcus blinked. You got married? Yes. Now let us in. He hesitated, then stepped back. The room was small and depressing, a single bed, a warped table, a window that overlooked the alley. There was a bottle of gin on the table, half empty, and the smell of it permeated the air. The Duke closed the door behind them and leaned against it, arms crossed. His presence filled the tiny space, silent and dangerous. Marcus looked between them, his hands shaking. I don't understand. Why are you here? Because Harold Voss is coming for us, Lydia said bluntly. And you're going to tell us why. Marcus's face crumpled. I can't. Yes, you can. She stepped closer, her voice hard. You worked for him. You forged documents, helped him blackmail people, destroyed families, and now he's using that against us. So you're going to tell me everything, or I swear I'll turn you over to the authorities myself. Lydia, please. No, you don't get to beg. You don't get to play the victim. You did this. Now fix it. Marcus sank down onto the bed, his head in his hands. You don't know what he's like, what he's capable of. Then tell me. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then slowly the words started spilling out. It started 5 years ago. I'd gotten into debt, gambling mostly. Voss offered to clear it in exchange for a favor. Just one, he said, a small thing. Forge a few documents, make it look like a business rival had ties to smugglers. It seemed harmless. But it wasn't, the Duke said quietly. Marcus shook his head. Once I did it, he owned me. He kept asking for more documents, more lies, more... His voice broke. I tried to stop, tried to get out, but he threatened your mother, Lydia. Threatened Eleanor. Said he'd ruin them if I didn't cooperate. So you just kept doing it. What choice did I have? You could have told someone, gone to the police, done literally anything except destroy us. I know. Marcus looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. I know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Lydia felt nothing. No sympathy, no anger. Just a cold, hollow space where her feelings for him used to be. What is Voss planning? The Duke asked. Marcus wiped his eyes. I don't know the details, but I know it's big. He's been collecting leverage for years. Documents, secrets, debts, and he's planning to use it all at once. Some kind of coordinated strike against the people who've crossed him. When? I don't know. Soon. He's been moving assets, calling in favors. It's close. The Duke exchanged a glance with Lydia. Who's his target? Marcus hesitated. Tell us, Lydia said. Everyone. Parliament, the aristocracy, the banks. He's going to expose every secret he has all at once and watch the whole system collapse. And then, in the chaos, he'll take control. The room went silent. Lydia's mind raced. If Voss exposed even half of what Marcus was describing, the scandal would be catastrophic. Families would be destroyed, fortunes lost. The government itself could fall, and she and the Duke would be caught in the middle of it. There has to be a way to stop him, she said. Marcus laughed bitterly. There isn't. He's too powerful, too well connected. You can't fight him. We're going to try anyway. Then you're fools. The Duke stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. Where does he keep the documents? Marcus's eyes widened. You can't be serious. Where? I don't... The Duke pulled the pistol from his coat and set it on the table. He didn't point it at Marcus, didn't threaten him, just let it sit there, a silent promise. Marcus's hands trembled. He has a vault in his estate outside London. That's where he keeps the originals. How do we get in? You don't. The place is a fortress. Guards, locks, traps. Even if you got inside, you'd never make it out. Let me worry about that. The Duke picked up the gun and tucked it back into his coat. Draw me a map. You're insane. Probably. Draw it anyway. Marcus looked at Lydia, pleading. Tell him to stop. This is suicide. But Lydia didn't say anything, because the Duke was right. If they didn't stop Voss now, they never would. Marcus pulled a scrap of paper from the table and began sketching with shaking hands. They left Dover 2 hours later with a map, a list of names, and a plan that had maybe a 10% chance of working. The Duke studied the map as the carriage rattled back toward London. This is going to be difficult. That's an understatement. If we're caught, we won't be. You don't know that. Lydia turned to look at him. Do you want to back out? No? Then stop talking about what might go wrong and start figuring out how to make it go right. A faint smile crossed his face. You're bossy when you're scared. I'm not scared. Liar. She glared at him, but there was no heat in it. Fine. I'm terrified. Are you happy? No, but I'm glad you're honest. They spent the rest of the ride planning. The Duke knew people, former soldiers, experts in security, men who owed him favors. He started making a list of who to contact, what resources they'd need, how to move without drawing attention. Lydia watched him work, watched the way his mind turned the problem over, dissecting it with ruthless efficiency. He was good at this, not just smart, but strategic in a way that went beyond intelligence. You've done this before, she said. He glanced up. Done what? Planned something impossible. Once or twice? Tell me. He hesitated, then set down the map. After my father died, there were 3 families who thought they could challenge my claim to the title. They had influence, money, connections, and I was 19 with no allies and a crumbling estate. What did you do? I found their weaknesses. One had gambling debts he'd hidden from his wife. Another was embezzling from his own company. The third had a mistress he was keeping in a house near Westminster. The Duke's voice was matter-of-fact, clinical. I gathered evidence, built cases, and then I made them an offer. Back down, or I'd destroy them. And they backed down. 2 of them did. The third called my bluff. He paused. So I destroyed him. Quietly, thoroughly, and in a way that made sure no one else ever challenged me again. Lydia stared at him. That's ruthless. That's survival. Is that what this is? Survival? What else would it be? She didn't have an answer. Look, they reached London just after noon. The Duke sent word to his contacts immediately, coded messages, carefully phrased to avoid suspicion. By evening, they had a team assembled in the library. 6 men, all of them ex-military or former intelligence operatives, all of them loyal to the Duke. Lydia sat in the corner and listened as they went over the plan. Voss's estate was 10 miles outside the city, surrounded by walls and patrolled by guards. The vault was in the basement, accessible only through a locked door that required 2 keys, one held by Voss himself, the other by his head of security. Getting in would require distraction, timing, and more luck than Lydia was comfortable betting on. We'll need someone on the inside, one of the men said. His name was Carter, a wiry man with sharp eyes and a scar along his jaw. Someone who can get close to Voss without raising suspicion. I'll do it, Lydia said. Every head in the room turned toward her. No, the Duke said immediately. Why not? Because it's too dangerous. And sending someone else isn't? That's different. How? He didn't answer. Carter cleared his throat. Actually, Your Grace, she might be right. Voss knows the Duchess. He'd expect her to approach him, especially if she seemed desperate. Absolutely not. Rowan. Lydia stood and crossed the room to him. We don't have another option. You said it yourself. We need someone on the inside, and I'm the only one who can get that close. You're asking me to put you in the same room as a man who wants to destroy us. I'm telling you there's no other way. His jaw worked, muscles tight. If something goes wrong, then you'll come get me, like you said you would. They stared at each other, the room silent around them. Finally, the Duke nodded. Fine, but you follow the plan exactly. No improvising, no heroics. Agreed. Carter leaned forward. When do we move? The Duke glanced at the map. Tomorrow night. Voss is hosting a gathering at his estate. Business associates, politicians. It's the perfect cover. And the Duchess gets an invitation how? Lydia smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. I'll send him a letter. Tell him I want to negotiate. He'll never believe that. He will if I make it convincing enough. Boy. She wrote the letter that night, alone in her room. It took 6 drafts before she got it right. Just the right mix of desperation and defiance. Enough to make Voss curious, but not suspicious. Mr. Voss, I know what you're planning, and I know I can't stop you, but I'd like to try anyway. If you're willing to meet, I'll come to your estate tomorrow evening. Alone. Lydia Blackwell. She sealed it and sent it by courier. The response came 2 hours later. Tomorrow. 8 o'clock. Come alone, as promised. And Duchess, don't disappoint me. Lydia handed the letter to the Duke without a word. He read it, his face unreadable. Then he crumpled it in his fist. I don't like this. You don't have to like it. You just have to trust me. I do trust you. It's him I don't trust. Then make sure your plan works. He looked at her, and for a moment she saw past the mask he always wore. The control, the calculation. Underneath, he was just as scared as she was. Lydia, he said quietly, if anything happens to you, it won't. But if it does, she stepped closer and put her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the fabric of his shirt. It won't, because you're going to be there, and you don't lose. Something shifted in his expression. He covered her hand with his, fingers warm and solid. No, he said, I don't. They stood like that for a long moment, the space between them charged with something neither of them wanted to name. Then Lydia pulled away. I should get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Lydia. She stopped at the door. Be careful. Always. She left before he could see her hands shaking. Bum. The next evening, Lydia dressed in her finest gown, deep burgundy silk with black lace, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Eleanor had come to help her, though she'd cried the entire time. "I don't understand why you have to do this," Eleanor said, fastening the clasp of Lydia's necklace. "Because someone has to." "But why you?" "Because I'm the only one he'll see." Eleanor's hand stilled. "What if he hurts you?" "He won't." "You don't know that." Lydia turned to face her sister. "Listen to me. If something goes wrong, if I don't come back, don't say that. If I don't come back, the Duke will take care of you. He promised. I don't want his promises. I want you." Lydia pulled Eleanor into a hug, holding her tight. "I know, and I'll do everything I can to make sure I come home. But if I don't, stop." Eleanor pulled back, tears streaming down her face. "Just stop. You're going to be fine. You have to be." Lydia nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed it. The carriage ride to Voss's estate was silent. The Duke sat across from her, armed and tense. Carter and 2 other men rode on top, hidden beneath traveling cloaks. The plan was simple. Lydia would go inside, keep Voss distracted. While he was occupied, the Duke and his team would infiltrate the basement, crack the vault, and retrieve the documents. Simple, except for the dozen ways it could fall apart. "Remember," the Duke said as the estate came into view, "you stay in the main house. You don't go anywhere alone, and if he tries anything—" "I scream. I know." "I'm serious, Lydia." "So am I." The carriage stopped in front of a sprawling manor, all stone and iron and shadows. Lights blazed in the windows, and Lydia could hear music drifting out, a party in full swing. The Duke helped her down, his hand lingering on hers. 2 hours. That's all we need. I'll give you 3. Don't be a hero. I could say the same to you. He almost smiled. Then he stepped back and Lydia walked toward the house alone. A servant opened the door before she could knock. "Duchess Blackwell, Mr. Voss is expecting you." She followed him through a marble hallway, past rooms filled with guests laughing and drinking, into a private study at the back of the house. Harold Voss stood by the fireplace, a glass of brandy in his hand. "Duchess," he said, smiling, "how lovely of you to come." Lydia forced herself to smile back. "Thank you for seeing me." "Of course, though I must admit I'm curious. What could you possibly want to negotiate?" "My family's safety, in exchange for information." Voss's smile widened. How deliciously predictable. "Please, sit. Let's talk." She sat, every nerve in her body screaming to run, and the clock started ticking. 30 minutes in, Voss was still talking, and Lydia was running out of stalling tactics. She'd given him small pieces of information, names, connections, things that sounded valuable but were actually useless. He'd listened with that infuriating smile, sipping his brandy, watching her like a cat with a mouse. "You're very good at this," he said eventually. "At what?" "Lying." Her stomach dropped. "I'm not—" "Yes, you are. And frankly, I'm impressed. But we both know you didn't come here to negotiate. You came here to distract me." Lydia's heart slammed against her ribs. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't." Voss set down his glass and walked toward her. "Tell me, Duchess, where is your husband right now?" "At home." "Liar." He moved fast, faster than she expected, and grabbed her wrist. His grip was iron tight. "Let go of me." "In a moment. First, you're going to tell me what he's planning." "I don't—" The door burst open. The Duke stood in the doorway, gun drawn, his face a mask of cold fury. "Let her go." Voss smiled. "Ah, there you are." He didn't release her. "I said let her go." "Or what? You'll shoot me? In front of 50 witnesses?" "If I have to." Voss laughed. "You won't. Because the moment you do, my men will tear this place apart looking for your team. And I assume they're in my basement right now trying to crack my vault." The Duke's expression didn't change, but Lydia saw his knuckles whiten on the gun. "Here's what's going to happen," Voss continued. "You're going to call them off, and then you and your lovely wife are going to leave, quietly. And in return, I won't destroy you. Yet." "No." "No?" "You heard me." Voss's smile faded. "You're making a mistake. I've made plenty. This isn't one of them. For a moment, no one moved. Then Lydia drove her elbow into Voss's ribs as hard as she could. He gasped, his grip loosening, and she wrenched free. The Duke lunged forward, slamming Voss against the wall. The gun pressed under his chin. "If you ever touch her again," the Duke said quietly, "I will end you, slowly, painfully, and no one will stop me." Voss's eyes blazed. "You can't! Watch me!"
A shout echoed from somewhere below, then running footsteps. Carter appeared in the doorway, breathless. "We got it, but we need to go. Now!" The Duke didn't move. "Lydia, go with Carter." "Not without you." "Go." She hesitated, then ran. The Duke held Voss for one more second, then he slammed him into the wall again and followed. They made it to the carriage just as Voss's guards poured out of the house. The Duke shouted to the driver, and they took off, hooves clattering on stone. Lydia looked back to see Voss standing in the doorway, his face twisted with rage, and she knew, with absolute certainty, that this was far from over. The carriage didn't stop until they were 5 miles outside London. When it finally lurched to a halt in a clearing off the main road, Lydia was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. The Duke threw open the door and jumped out first, then turned to help her down. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his hands on her shoulders, eyes scanning her face. "No, I'm fine." "Lydia, us." I said I'm fine, but she wasn't. Her wrist throbbed where Voss had grabbed her, and she could still feel the pressure of his fingers, the cold certainty in his voice when he'd said her husband's name. Carter appeared beside them, holding a leather satchel. "We got everything. Ledgers, documents, correspondence. It's all here." The Duke took the satchel without looking away from Lydia. "Good. Get the men back to the estate. Quietly. I don't want anyone knowing we were there. And you? We'll follow in an hour. I need to make sure she's all right." Carter nodded and disappeared. The Duke guided Lydia to a fallen log and made her sit. Then he crouched in front of her, his face level with hers. "Look at me," he said quietly. She did. "You did exactly what I asked you not to do." "I know. You could have been killed. But I wasn't. That's not the point." Lydia's hands clenched in her lap. "Then what is the point? We got what we came for. Voss knows we're not backing down, and I'm still here. So what exactly are you angry about?" The Duke was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her hands in his, carefully, like she might break. "I'm not angry," he said. "I'm terrified." The confession stunned her. "When I saw him grab you," the Duke continued, his voice rough, "when I saw his hands on you, I would have burned that entire house down to get to you. Do you understand that? I would have destroyed everything." "Rowan, I don't care about the documents. I don't care about Voss or his network or any of it. I care about you. And the thought of losing you." He stopped, his jaw working. "I can't do that again." "Again?" He looked away. "My mother. She died when I was 12. Pneumonia. I watched her fade for weeks, and there was nothing I could do. And then my father, he had a stroke 2 years later, gone in a day. I've spent my entire life making sure I never feel that helpless again. And then you—" He didn't finish. Lydia's throat tightened. She'd never heard him talk about his family, never seen him this unguarded. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. Because I'm too stubborn to die." A sound escaped him, half laugh, half sob. He pressed his forehead against her hands, and she felt him shaking. She pulled her hands free and cupped his face, making him look at her. "I'm here," she said. "I'm alive. And we just stole everything Voss has been building for years, so stop acting like we lost and start acting like we won." Something shifted in his expression. The fear receded, replaced by something fiercer. "You're right. I know." He stood, pulling her up with him. "Let's go home. We have work to do." They spent the next 3 days locked in the Duke's study, going through every document Carter had taken from Voss's vault. It was worse than they'd expected. Voss had leverage on 47 families, members of parliament, judges, business owners, even a minor royal. The scope of it was staggering: blackmail, fraud, extortion, all carefully documented and cross-referenced. He was going to use this to control the entire government, Lydia said, staring at a ledger that detailed payments to 3 different cabinet ministers.
He still might, the Duke said grimly. If he has copies. He doesn't. Carter said the vault was the only place he kept originals. Then we need to move fast, before he realizes what we have and tries to stop us. Lydia looked up. What are you thinking? The Duke tapped one of the documents, a letter from a Lord Ashcroft to Voss, promising votes in exchange for suppressing evidence of his son's gambling debts. I'm thinking we use his own weapons against him. We leak this, carefully, strategically. Let the people he's been blackmailing know we have the proof. Give them a chance to turn on him before he can use it against them. That's brilliant. It's risky. If even one of them goes to Voss, they won't. Not if we make it clear that we're offering them a way out. The Duke studied her. You're good at this. At what? Strategy. You think like a chess player. I learned from watching you. Something warm flickered in his eyes. We're going to win this. I know. He crossed the room and kissed her. It wasn't planned. Neither of them had meant for it to happen. But suddenly his hands were in her hair and her arms were around his neck, and they were kissing like the world was ending. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. We shouldn't, Lydia started. I know. The contract, I don't care about the contract. Rowan, he kissed her again, slower this time, deliberate. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. I know we agreed this was just business, he said quietly. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being that. At least for me. Lydia's heart was pounding. For me, too. So what do we do about it? I don't know, but maybe... She hesitated. Maybe we figure it out after we destroy Voss. He smiled. One crisis at a time? Exactly. They started the leaks the next day. The Duke had contacts everywhere. Journalists, politicians, society matrons who thrived on gossip. He fed them pieces of information, just enough to start questions, but not enough to reveal their source. Within 48 hours, the whispers had turned to shouts. Lord Ashcroft was called before Parliament to explain his connection to Voss. A prominent judge resigned amid allegations of accepting bribes. 2 business owners fled the country before charges could be filed. The scandal spread like wildfire. And at the center of it all, Harold Voss watched his empire begin to crumble. Lydia saw him once during that week, at a ball she'd attended with the Duke. Voss had been standing near the windows, his face pale and drawn, surrounded by people who'd once courted his favor and now avoided his gaze. When he saw her, something vicious flashed in his eyes. But he didn't approach, didn't speak, just watched. He's planning something, Lydia murmured to the Duke. Let him, we're 3 steps ahead. But that night, as they returned home, Lydia couldn't shake the feeling that they'd missed something. Bam. The answer came 2 days later in the form of a letter delivered to the estate. Lydia found it on the breakfast table, addressed to her in handwriting she didn't recognize. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The photograph showed Eleanor walking down a street in Bloomsbury. The angle suggested it had been taken from a distance, without her knowledge. The letter was brief. You took something from me. Now I have something of yours. If you want her back, come alone to the warehouse on Limehouse Pier tonight, midnight, tell your husband, and she dies. Lydia's hands went numb. The Duke appeared in the doorway. Lydia, what's wrong? She couldn't speak, just handed him the letter. His face went white. When did this arrive? Just now. He has Eleanor. He's going to kill her if I don't. You're not going. I have to. It's a trap. I don't care. She's my sister. The Duke grabbed her shoulders. Lydia, listen to me. If you go there alone, he'll kill you both. That's how this works. Then what am I supposed to do? Just let her die? No, we're going to get her back, but we're doing it my way. We don't have time for your way. He said midnight. That's 8 hours. Then we use every minute of it. By 6 o'clock, they had a plan. It involved Carter and his men, 2 constables the Duke trusted, and a level of coordination that made Lydia's head spin. The Duke explained it to her 3 times, each time slower, until she could recite it back to him. You go in first, he said. Keep Voss talking. We'll move in from the east side, quiet, and get Eleanor out before he knows we're there. And if he sees you? He won't. You don't know that. I do, because I've done this before. Lydia wanted to argue, wanted to tell him it was too dangerous, too complicated, but she could see the certainty in his eyes, the same cold calculation that had destroyed 3 families and built an empire. Fine, she said, but if anything goes wrong, it won't. If it does, you get Eleanor out first. Not me. Her. The Duke's jaw tightened. That's not... Promise me. They stared at each other. Promise me, Rowan. Finally, he nodded. I promise. Limehouse Pier was a wasteland at night. Lydia arrived alone, as instructed, stepping out of the carriage onto cracked cobblestones that glistened with something she didn't want to identify. The warehouse loomed ahead, a hulking shadow against the Thames. She could see a light burning in one of the windows. She walked toward it, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The door was unlocked. Inside, the warehouse was cavernous and dark, lit only by a handful of lanterns scattered across the floor. Crates were stacked against the walls, and the air smelled like salt and rot. Harold Voss stood in the center of the space, next to a chair where Eleanor sat bound and gagged. Eleanor's eyes were wide with terror, tears streaming down her face. Lydia's vision went red. "Let her go," she said, her voice shaking. Voss smiled. "Hello, Duchess. So nice of you to come." "I'm here. Now let her go." "In a moment. First, we're going to have a conversation. We have nothing to talk about." "Oh, I disagree. You see, you and your husband have caused me a great deal of trouble, and I think it's time you paid for that." Lydia took a step forward. "If you hurt her, you'll what? You're alone, unarmed, and completely at my mercy. So I suggest you listen very carefully." Behind her, she heard the faint creak of wood, the Duke and his men moving into position. She needed to keep Voss talking. "What do you want?" she asked. "Everything you took from me, the documents, the ledgers, all of it. You're going to return them, publicly recant the leaks, and then you're going to disappear. You and your husband. Leave London, leave England, and never come back." "And if I refuse?" Voss walked over to Eleanor and put his hand on her shoulder. Eleanor flinched. "Then I kill her, right here, right now, and you get to watch." Lydia's hands clenched. "You're a monster. I'm a businessman, and you've cost me a fortune." "You're finished, Voss. Even if I gave you the documents back, half of London already knows what you've done. You've lost." "Have I?" He pulled a knife from his coat. "Because from where I'm standing, I'm holding all the cards." The blade pressed against Eleanor's throat. Lydia's breath stopped. "Choose," Voss said, "the documents, or her life." Time seemed to slow. Lydia could see Eleanor trembling, see the terror in her eyes, could see Voss's finger tightening on the knife. And then, from somewhere in the darkness, the Duke's voice rang out. "Drop the knife!" Voss spun around. The Duke stood 10 feet away, pistol aimed directly at Voss's head. Carter and 2 other men flanked him, weapons drawn. "I said drop it!" Voss laughed. "You're bluffing. You won't shoot, not with your wife standing right there." "Try me." For a moment, no one moved. Then Voss grabbed Eleanor by the hair and yanked her out of the chair, using her as a shield. The knife stayed at her throat. "You take 1 step closer and I kill her." The Duke's expression didn't change. "No, you won't." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do, because you're not stupid. You kill her, you lose your leverage, and then I put a bullet in your head." Voss's hand trembled. "You're lying." "I never lie." Lydia watched the 2 men, her mind racing. She needed to do something, needed to tip the balance, but she couldn't think, couldn't breathe. And then Eleanor bit down on Voss's hand, hard. Voss screamed, his grip loosening, and Eleanor wrenched free. She ran. The Duke fired. The shot echoed through the warehouse, deafening. Voss fell. For a moment, everything was chaos. Carter and his men rushing forward, the Duke running to Eleanor, Lydia frozen in place. Then the Duke was in front of her, his hands on her face. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. "Eleanor?" "She's safe. Carter has her." Lydia looked past him to where Voss lay on the ground, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped through his fingers, but he was alive. "You shot him," she said numbly. "I told him I would." "You could have killed him."
I know, but I didn't, because we need him alive to testify.
2 constables appeared and dragged Voss to his feet. He was swearing, screaming threats, but no one was listening.
Lydia watched him being led away, and something inside her finally broke. She started laughing. The Duke pulled her close. "Lydia? We did it," she said through the laughter, through the tears that were suddenly streaming down her face. "We actually did it. Yes, we did." Eleanor appeared beside them, shaking but unhurt. Lydia grabbed her and held on tight. "I'm sorry," Lydia whispered. "I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault." "Yes, it is. I brought this into our lives." "No, you saved us. Both of you." The Duke rested his hand on Lydia's back, solid and warm. And for the first time in weeks, Lydia let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they were going to be all right.
The news broke the next morning. Harold Voss, arrested for blackmail, extortion, kidnapping, and attempted murder. His network dismantled, his assets seized, his influence shattered. Within 3 days, half of London's elite was scrambling to distance themselves from him. The families he'd blackmailed came forward, testifying in exchange for immunity. The evidence was overwhelming. Voss's trial lasted 2 weeks.
Lydia attended every day, sitting in the gallery with the Duke beside her. She watched Voss try to salvage his dignity, watched him rage and plead, and finally crumble. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, the courtroom erupted in applause. Lydia didn't clap, just sat there, feeling the weight of it all finally lift. The Duke took her hand. "It's over." "Yes. How do you feel?" She thought about it. Tired, relieved, and what? Free.
The celebration that night was small. Just Lydia, the Duke, Eleanor, and a few close friends. They gathered in the library, champagne flowing, laughter filling the air. Lydia stood by the window, watching the garden below, when the Duke appeared beside her. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm thinking." "About? What happens now?" He was silent for a moment, then he said, "The contract expires in 4 months." Lydia's chest tightened. "I know. You could leave. Take your settlement. Start fresh." "I could." "Is that what you want?" She turned to look at him. "Is it what you want?" The Duke set down his glass and took both her hands in his. "No. I want you to stay, not because of the contract, not because it's convenient, because I love you." The words hung in the air between them. Lydia's breath caught. "You love me?" "Yes. I think I have for a while. I just didn't know how to say it." Tears pricked her eyes. "Rowan, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know." "But I do," she said. "I do say it back. I love you too." His expression cracked, relief and joy flooding his face. He pulled her close and kissed her, and this time it wasn't desperate or hurried. It was certain, real. When they broke apart, he was smiling, really smiling, the kind of smile she'd never seen before. "So you'll stay?" he asked. "On one condition." "What?" "We rewrite the contract. Make it an actual marriage, not a transaction. Done. And you stop working 18-hour days." "That's 2 conditions. Take it or leave it." He laughed and kissed her again. "I'll take it." The news of their renewed vows spread quickly through society. People whispered, of course, speculated about whether it had been a love match all along or if something had changed. Lydia didn't care. She stood beside the Duke at their second wedding, this one real, surrounded by people who actually mattered, and felt nothing but certainty. When the officiant asked if she took Rowan Blackwell as her husband, she said yes without hesitation. And when he asked the Duke the same, Rowan looked at her with so much love it made her chest ache. "I do," he said. This time, people cheered. 3 months later, Lydia stood in the same library where it had all started, reading a letter that had just arrived. It was from Marcus Webb. He'd been arrested shortly after Voss's trial and sentenced to 5 years for fraud and forgery. The letter was an apology. Long, rambling, full of regrets and excuses. Lydia read it once. Then she burned it. The Duke appeared in the doorway. "Was that from him?" "Yes." "What did he say?" "It doesn't matter." The Duke crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her from behind. You're allowed to be angry, you know. I am angry, but I'm also done carrying it. He doesn't get any more of my time. He kissed her temple. I'm proud of you. Why? Because you're stronger than I'll ever be. She turned in his arms and smiled. We're stronger together. Yes, we are. They stood like that for a while, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, the sound of Eleanor's laughter drifting in from the garden, and Lydia thought, for the first time in her life, that maybe happy endings were real after all. Not perfect, not easy, but real. But real didn't mean easy. 3 weeks after their second wedding, Lydia woke to find Rowan already gone from their bed. She found him in his study at dawn, surrounded by papers, his face drawn with exhaustion. You didn't sleep, she said from the doorway. He looked up, startled. I didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. The empty bed did. She crossed the room and looked at the document spread across his desk. What is this? Voss's testimony. The prosecution sent it over last night. They want me to review it before the final sentencing. Lydia picked up one of the pages. It was a transcript, Voss's lawyer trying to argue for leniency, claiming his client had been coerced, manipulated, forced into his crimes by unnamed partners. He's still lying, she said. I know, but his lawyer is good. They're trying to create reasonable doubt, reduce his sentence. Will it work? Rowan's jaw tightened. Not if I have anything to say about it. He stood and pulled on his coat. I need to go to the prosecutor's office. Make sure they have everything they need to keep him locked away. I'm coming with you. Lydia, don't argue. If Voss is trying to weasel out of this, I want to be there. He studied her face, then nodded. Get dressed. We leave in 20 minutes. The prosecutor's office was in Westminster, a stern building that smelled like old paper and desperation. They were led into a cramped conference room where 3 lawyers sat around a table covered in files. The lead prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Helena Chase, stood when they entered. Your Grace, Duchess, thank you for coming on such short notice. Rowan didn't waste time with pleasantries. What's the problem? Chase gestured to the files. Voss's defense is claiming that several key documents we submitted were obtained illegally. They're arguing that the evidence from the vault should be inadmissible. Lydia's stomach dropped. Can they do that? They're trying. If the judge agrees, we lose half our case, and Voss could walk with a reduced sentence. That's not happening, Rowan said flatly. I agree, but we need to prove the documents were legally obtained, which means we need your testimony about how you acquired them. Lydia and Rowan exchanged a glance. We had permission, Rowan said carefully, from a source inside Voss's organization. Can this source testify? No. Why not? Because he's dead. The room went silent. Chase's expression hardened. Then we have a problem. Without a witness to corroborate your story, the defense will tear it apart. They'll claim you broke in, stole the documents, and fabricated evidence to frame their client. That's absurd, Lydia said. We have 47 families willing to testify about what Voss did to them, and the defense will argue they're all lying to save themselves. Without the original documents from the vault, verified as authentic and legally obtained, our case falls apart. Rowan slammed his hand on the table. Then we find another way. What other way? Unless you have another witness. We do, Lydia said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. Who? Chase asked. Lydia's heart was pounding. My stepfather, Marcus Webb, he worked for Voss. He knows where the documents came from, how they were created, and who was involved. If he testifies, he's in prison, Rowan said, and he has every reason to lie to reduce his own sentence. But he's also the only person who can verify what we're saying, and Lydia took a breath. And I think I can convince him to tell the truth. Rowan stared at her. Lydia, you don't owe him anything. I know. But if we don't do this, Voss wins. And I'm not letting that happen. Chase leaned forward. If you can get Webb to testify, we can use it. But it has to be credible. No deals, no promises of leniency. Just the truth. I'll get it, Lydia said. Well, they went to the prison the next morning. Newgate was a fortress of stone and despair, its walls thick with the weight of human misery. Lydia had never been inside before. And the moment she stepped through the gates, she felt the cold seep into her bones. Rowan stayed close, his hand on the small of her back as they were led through narrow corridors to a visiting room. Marcus Webb was brought in 10 minutes later, shackled and pale. When he saw Lydia, his face crumpled.
"Lydia, I didn't think you'd come." She sat down across from him, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "I need your help. Anything. I'll do anything." Voss is trying to get his sentence reduced. His lawyers are claiming the evidence against him was obtained illegally. We need you to testify about how the documents were created and where they were kept. Marcus's expression shifted from hope to fear. "I can't. If I testify against Voss, he's in prison. He can't hurt you anymore." "You don't understand. He has people on the outside. If I talk, they'll come for me. For your mother. For Eleanor." Lydia's hands clenched under the table. "So you'd rather let him go free? Let him destroy more families, ruin more lives, just to save yourself?" "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is." She leaned forward. "You ruined us, Marcus. You gambled away everything we had, sold us out to a monster, and then ran. And I've spent the last 6 months cleaning up your mess. So the least you can do, the absolute least, is tell the truth." Tears streamed down his face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix this. Testimony does." Rowan spoke for the first time. "If you testify, I'll make sure you're protected. Transferred to a different facility, kept separate from anyone connected to Voss. You have my word." Marcus looked between them. "And if I refuse?" "Then you stay here," Lydia said coldly. "In the same prison as men Voss has paid to make your life hell. And when he gets out, and he will, if you don't help us, he'll come for you anyway." The silence stretched. Finally, Marcus nodded. "I'll do it." "But boss..." The trial resumed 3 days later. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, aristocrats, people who'd been victimized by Voss, all crammed into the gallery to watch the final act. Lydia sat in the front row with Rowan, Eleanor beside her. She could feel the weight of every eye in the room, the anticipation hanging thick in the air. Marcus Webb was called to the stand. He looked small up there, diminished by the enormity of what he was about to do. But when he spoke, his voice was steady. "State your name for the record," Chase said. "Marcus Webb." "And what was your relationship to Harold Voss?" "I worked for him for 5 years, creating forged documents, falsifying records, helping him blackmail people." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Chase held up one of the documents from the vault. "Do you recognize this?" Marcus looked at it and nodded. "Yes, I created it. It's a forged contract linking Lord Pemberton to a smuggling operation. Voss used it to force Pemberton to vote against a banking reform bill." "And where did Voss keep the original documents?" "In a vault beneath his estate. He kept everything there, originals, copies, correspondence. He said it was insurance." "Insurance against what?" "Against anyone trying to stop him." Chase turned to the jury. "And can you verify that the documents submitted as evidence in this case came from that vault?" "Yes. I recognize my own work, and I know Voss's system. Everything here is real." Voss's lawyer stood, objecting, but the judge waved him down. The testimony continued for 2 hours. Marcus detailed every crime, every scheme, every victim. By the time he finished, the courtroom was silent. Voss sat at the defense table, his face a mask of rage. When the judge finally called for a recess, Lydia felt like she could breathe for the first time in days. Rowan took her hand. "You did it. We did it." Eleanor leaned against her shoulder. "Is it really over?" "Almost." The verdict came the next day. Guilty. On all counts. The judge sentenced Voss to 30 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for 20. When the gavel fell, the courtroom erupted. Lydia closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. Cheers, applause, the release of months of tension. Rowan pulled her close, his arms tight around her. "It's over. It's really over." She nodded against his chest, too overwhelmed to speak. They left the courthouse through a side entrance, avoiding the crowd of journalists waiting outside. But even in the carriage, Lydia could hear the shouts, the celebration. "London's going to be talking about this for years," Eleanor said, grinning. "Let them," Lydia said. "I don't care anymore."
Rowan squeezed her hand. What do you want to do now? She thought about it. Go home, sleep for a week, and then, what? Start living.
The weeks that followed were strange. After months of chaos, the sudden calm felt almost unsettling. Lydia found herself waking in the middle of the night, heart pounding, expecting some new crisis. But there wasn't one. Voss was locked away. Marcus was serving his sentence in a quiet facility far from London. The families Voss had victimized were rebuilding their lives. And Lydia and Rowan were finally just a married couple. It took some getting used to. You're staring at me, Rowan said one evening, looking up from his book. They were in the library, Lydia curled up on the sofa, him in his chair by the fire. It was domestic and ordinary, and so unlike the way they'd started. I'm not staring, Lydia said. I'm observing. That's the same thing. It's different. Staring implies I'm surprised. Observing implies I'm just appreciating. He set down his book. Appreciating what?
This. Us. The fact that we're not fighting for our lives anymore. Rowan stood and crossed to the sofa, sitting beside her. Do you miss it? Miss what? Nearly dying? The adrenaline, the stakes. Lydia considered the question. No, I miss feeling useful, like I was doing something that mattered. You still are. How? I go to parties, smile at people, and pretend to care about fashion. It's not exactly saving the world.
Maybe not. But you've helped 3 families in the last month alone, found jobs for people Voss destroyed, connected them with resources, gave them a way forward. That matters. She looked at him, surprised. How do you know about that? I pay attention. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You're brilliant, Lydia, and you don't need a crisis to prove it. Her throat tightened. Thank you. For what? For seeing me, the real me, not just the role I play. He kissed her forehead. Always.
2 months later, an opportunity arrived. It came in the form of a letter from Lady Pemberton, the same woman who'd questioned Lydia at that garden party months ago. Duchess, I write to you not as a gossip, but as a woman who has witnessed your strength firsthand. There are many of us in London who have suffered at the hands of men like Voss, though perhaps not to the same degree. We are organizing a charitable foundation to support families in financial distress, particularly those victimized by predatory lending and extortion. We would be honored if you would consider joining us as a founding member. Your experience and insight would be invaluable. With respect, Lady Catherine Pemberton. Lydia read the letter 3 times, then showed it to Rowan. What do you think? She asked. I think it's perfect for you. Really? You don't think it's too what? Too ambitious? Too public? He smiled. Lydia, you just took down one of the most dangerous men in London. I think you can handle a charitable foundation. But what if I'm not good at it? What if... He took her hands. Then you'll figure it out. The same way you figured out everything else. By being stubborn and brilliant and refusing to give up. She laughed despite herself. You make it sound easy. It won't be. But nothing worth doing is. She kissed him. I love you. I love you too. Now go write your acceptance letter before Lady Pemberton changes her mind. Asum. The foundation launched 3 months later. They called it the Sanctuary Fund, a place for families to find help without judgment, without shame. Lydia threw herself into the work with the same intensity she'd brought to destroying Voss. She interviewed families, connected them with solicitors, helped them navigate debt and bankruptcy. She gave speeches, raised money, and slowly, quietly, began to change the way London thought about financial distress. Eleanor joined her, managing the administrative side with surprising skill. You're good at this, Lydia said one afternoon, watching her sister organize a stack of applications. Eleanor grinned. I learned from the best. You're better than I was at your age. That's because you were too busy saving us. Lydia's chest tightened. I didn't save us. We saved each other. Eleanor hugged her. Yeah, we did. But not everyone was happy about the foundation's success. 6 months in, Lydia started receiving letters. Anonymous, hostile, accusing her of overstepping, of shaming good families by helping the desperate. She burned the first few. Then they started coming more frequently. One morning, she opened her correspondence to find a letter that made her blood run cold. You think you've won, Duchess, but you've only made new enemies. Watch your back. She showed it to Rowan. His face went hard. This stops now. How? I'll hire security. No one gets close to you without going through them first. Rowan, that's excessive. I don't care. I'm not losing you to some coward who hides behind anonymous threats. The security arrived the next day. 2 former soldiers who shadowed Lydia everywhere she went. It was intrusive and uncomfortable, but she couldn't deny the relief. The letters stopped. Fought. A year after Voss's sentencing, Lydia received an unexpected visitor. She was in the Foundation's office, reviewing applications when Mrs. Garrick appeared in the doorway. Your Grace, there's someone here to see you. Who? He wouldn't give his name, but he said it was important. Lydia frowned. Did he say what it was about? No, but Mrs. Garrick hesitated. He looks familiar. I think he might have worked for Mr. Voss. Lydia's pulse quickened. Where is he? Waiting in the front room. Your security is with him. Lydia stood. Stay here. She walked to the front room, her heart pounding. The man waiting there was in his 40s, thin and nervous, with the kind of face that disappeared in a crowd. When he saw her, he stood quickly. Duchess, thank you for seeing me. Who are you? My name is Thomas Birch. I used to work in Mr. Voss's household, as a clerk. Lydia's guards tensed, but she waved them back. What do you want? Birch pulled a sealed envelope from his coat. I've been carrying this for a year, debating whether to give it to you. But after everything you've done, the Foundation, helping people, I thought you deserved to know. Know what? He handed her the envelope. Voss kept records, not just of the people he blackmailed, but of the people who helped him. Politicians, judges, businessmen, names, dates, payments, everything. Lydia's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a list, 50 names, some she recognized, minor nobles, a few members of parliament. Others were unfamiliar. Where did you get this? She asked. I copied it before the vault was raided. Voss kept a second set of records in his personal safe. I took them when he was arrested. Why are you giving this to me now? Birch met her eyes. Because you're the only person I trust to use it the right way. Not for revenge, for justice. Lydia stared at the list, her mind racing. This could change everything, expose corruption at the highest levels, finish what they'd started. Thank you, she said quietly. Birch nodded and left. Lydia stood there for a long time, holding the list. Then she went to find Rowan. They reviewed the list together that night. This is bigger than Voss, Rowan said, his voice grim. If even half of these people are still in power, they are. I recognize some of the names. Then we have a decision to make. Do we expose them, or do we let it go? Lydia looked at him. What do you think we should do? I think... He paused. I think we've spent enough time fighting. We've built something good here. The Foundation is helping people. We're happy. If we go after these names, it'll drag us back into the chaos. You're saying we should let them get away with it. I'm saying we should choose our battles. Not every fight is ours to win. Lydia wanted to argue, wanted to tell him they had a responsibility. But she was tired, so tired of fighting. What if we compromise, she said. How? We don't go public, but we give the list to people who can use it. Prosecutors, investigators, journalists. Let them do the work. We just provide the information. Rowan considered it. That could work? And then we step back, focus on the Foundation, on our life. Let someone else carry the torch. He pulled her close. I like that plan. Me too. They sent the list to Helena Chase the next morning. Chase promised to handle it discreetly, to build cases without exposing Lydia and Rowan as sources. Within 6 months, 3 members of Parliament had resigned. 2 judges were under investigation. A prominent banker fled the country. And Lydia and Rowan watched from a distance, knowing they'd done their part. 2 years after their second wedding, Lydia stood in the ballroom of their estate, watching Eleanor dance with a young man who'd been courting her for months. She looks happy, Rowan said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of champagne. She is. He's a good man. Better than her sister's first choice? Lydia elbowed him. You weren't a choice. You were a necessity. And now, she turned to face him, smiling. Now you're everything. He kissed her, and the ballroom seemed to fade around them. When they broke apart, Rowan said, I have something for you. What? He pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat. The original contract. The one we signed 2 years ago. Lydia took it, her hands trembling. I thought we should destroy it, he said. Together. Make it official that we're not bound by obligation anymore. She looked at the contract, the cold, clinical language that had started everything, and then she tore it in half. Rowan laughed and took the pieces from her, throwing them into the fireplace. They watched the paper burn. No more contracts, Lydia said. No more lies. Just us. Just us. Yet, 5 years later, Lydia stood in the garden of their country estate, watching her daughter chase butterflies through the roses. The girl was 3, with Rowan's dark hair and Lydia's stubborn chin. She was fearless and loud, and utterly convinced the world existed for her amusement. Lydia loved her more than she'd thought possible. Rowan appeared beside her, their son, just 6 months old, asleep in his arms. She's going to be a handful, he said, watching their daughter. She already is. Just like her mother, Lydia smiled. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. They stood there together watching their children, and Lydia thought about how far they'd come. From strangers bound by desperation to partners bound by love. From fighting for survival to building a life. It hadn't been easy. There had been hard days, arguments, moments where she'd wondered if they'd made a mistake. But they'd chosen each other, every day, in every way that mattered. And that, she thought, was the real happy ending. Not perfection, not ease, just 2 people who'd decided that together was better than apart. What are you thinking about? Rowan asked. How lucky I am. Luck had nothing to do with it. Then what did? He looked at her, his eyes warm. You. Being brave enough to walk into my house and demand I help you. Being stubborn enough to stay. Being strong enough to love me even when I didn't deserve it. Lydia's throat tightened. You deserved it. Maybe now, but back then you were exactly what I needed. Cold, calculating, and powerful enough to save us. And now? Now you're exactly what I want. Kind, patient, and brave enough to let yourself be happy. Their daughter ran up to them, holding a dandelion. Mama, look! Lydia crouched down. It's beautiful. Make a wish. What should I wish for? The little girl thought about it seriously. Then she grinned. More flowers! Lydia laughed and blew on the dandelion, watching the seeds scatter on the wind. Rowan helped her stand, and they walked back toward the house together, their daughter running ahead, their son sleeping peacefully. And Lydia realized she didn't need to make a wish, because everything she'd ever wanted was already here. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And that was more than enough.